Hey everybody, how are you? So, in this video, I wanted to talk to you about psychodynamic patterns, more specifically, reflect on my own pattern as someone who is an Enneagram 9 and an ENFP INFP kind of hybrid. So, what I have discovered is patterns in life, patterns that emerge. They seem to emerge on their own, right? We can think of principles in nature as a greatest understanding of where these psychological patterns may arise from. I see these patterns as fundamentally adaptive, and that when they fail, they become maladaptive. So, in the case of the Enneagram 9, interestingly, there is a pattern of separation, of disassociating, of numbing out from the direct experience of the self. This can be understood as a retreat, a withdrawal from other people into this idealization in some sense, into this fantasy in some sense of peace, of creating a state of harmony. For example, it's very common for someone who is a type 9 to be conflict averse or conflict avoidant. It is the nature of a 9 to adapt to others, to try to minimize emotional conflict. This is what gives them the gift of building rapport as therapists, as helpers, as teachers, counselors, etc. But interestingly, with every strength is always the capacity for vice. We see the dynamics of the personality emerge insofar as there is the proper context for a response to the strategy. So it's interesting to consider how we learn or have learned to respond based on our early life experiences in our social relationships. This is why I'm interested in doing psychoanalytic therapy rather than taking a cognitive behavioral approach. Because what I want to do is I want the individual to start to get back in touch with who they are, where they come from, and how it is they could possibly see the future within the context of having hope, having faith, having some sense of grounded, purposeful meaning in their lives. So as I reflect on my own life, I notice a pattern, okay? The pattern is this. I like to have my affective state, my emotional state moved and influenced by, in some sense, the suffering of other people. So I move towards other people and the pain that they are in. I, in some sense, respond to those who are in pain. I move towards. See, there's this natural strategy in me to move towards other people, especially those who are suffering, to adopt their frame of reference, to bring, in some sense, my own sense of peace to them. This works great insofar as I am grounded in my own sense of self. I have a ground on which to stand, a foundation for me. But this foundation has to be built. It has to be learned. In my relationships, I have experienced a shaky foundation. And I think other type 9s may really be able to utilize what I've learned to help them self-reflect on how they have managed and responded to their relationships. So in my case, and what inspired me to really create this video, was I was idealizing other people. I had a very vivid and rich fantasy life as a child. In some sense, I was here, but not here. I was here, but then somewhere in my own mind. What a beautiful strategy. Some of you might think of this as an amazing strategy. It is. It's a gift. This capacity for imagining, this capacity for dreaming, this default neural network, as I discovered in college, is at the very root of people who are highly socially competent, who, in some sense, may actually be prone to states of psychosis as well. There's this default network in the brain, and I think as dreamers, as empaths, this temperament is inclined to these realities that are so real, right? That in some sense we have to cope with them through our own fantasies. How real these realities are. We have to use our imagination to cope with them. So when there's a relational disturbance, for an Enneagram 9, there is an adaptive response to avoid the conflict, and then to idealize the other person. There is an idea of the other. And interestingly, this was a very common pattern for me. As I have matured, I have learned to confront, to face, to see, to look at the reality of the other. To peer into the reality of the other is to confront the truth of that person's suffering. That which, in some sense, is very difficult to actually face as a 9, because we want to imagine that peace is possible, that suffering doesn't have to be something that we have to deal with. We don't want to deal with the discomfort and the pain, especially the pain and discomfort of a loved one. But as we mature, we begin to realize I am actually separate from the other. I have a role to play in what I choose to see. Here I am choosing to see the idealized version of this person or this situation. And I'm choosing to see what is good, not what is bad. All of these things sound so wonderful. But remember, it depends on the foundation. So as we cope, as we adapt, as we idealize the other, we do not learn how to confront the darkness, the suffering, the selfishness, the wounding. To have a genuine, loving relationship, to have a foundation, an experience of connection with God and another person, you have to have the work done of diving into your own soul. You have to see your conscience as genuinely honest. You have to say, I am a sinner, right? This person is selfish. We get to that point in maturity, I think. And then once we see that, the truth, the reality of the other is very much not peaceful. It is then we can bring a genuine peace, because we have confronted this deeper existential reality. And I think it is the 9, the peacemaker, the natural healer, that when they step into that frame, it's I can endure all things. I can be present for all people. I can show up fully. I can actually make everyone genuinely feel that their pain and their suffering, not only is it temporary, it is good, and it can heal. How counterintuitive and paradoxical this is, but I think this is the pattern. This is why I don't want to use a lot of psychopharmacological medicines, because I understand they interfere with nature's process of helping the individual to become more self-responsible and aware of these adaptive patterns. So that was a lot, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it, especially if you are a type 9 on the Enneagram. I would be very curious to hear if you can relate to anything that I've said. This also has something to do with the Hornevian patterns, the withdrawn pattern, how it is there is a withdrawal pattern and an inclination towards the fantasy. And it is, in some sense, the fantasy which really makes the person turn inward on themselves in the long run. It is the confrontation with the reality of the pain of the other, of the loved one, that can bring a genuine source of spiritual meaning and resiliency. So, what do you think? I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the video, let me know. Comment. See you later.